Welcome back to your Thursday Buckeye Talk, and I will lay out exactly what we're doing with a question from a tech subscriber. Y'all are going to do a pod over analyzing what it means to be a fan. LOL, this should be interesting, I guess, from the 614. That's what we're doing here. It's just me, Doug Lesmerises. It's not rants, it's overanalyzation. Some would say it's sports therapy. Some would say Dr. Doug is in the house. Some would say, please stop. Please stop. Some would say, don't do these podcasts anymore. This line of questioning is starting to get old and annoying. Anyone who says being an Ohio State fan isn't fun is dumb and doesn't have the mental capacity to be a fan. It's the mindset of a child. Stop enabling these whiny losers. Yes, it's fun to have a team that's good. No, I'm not miserable because we don't win a national championship every year. Duh. Move on from the 419. That's what we're talking about. So this is continuing part of what I have called, I think, the Joy Initiative that we're on. And there are two questions that spurred this. And then we did a big survey about, are the burdens of the burden of expectations, does it ever make it less fun to be an Ohio State fan? Have you ever tried to make yourself be less intense of an Ohio State fan? Do you wish you could? Are you national championship or bust? We've done a lot of things like this. We did the pod a couple, 10 days ago about, is Ohio State standard a national championship standard? We did a pod about how much faith do you have in Ryan Day? And I think your view of the program affects your faith in the coach. So your lens through which you view Ohio State football, I think affects everything that you do. So I'm going to chill out after this one. I'm actually going on vacation for a little bit. We have a lot of pods backlogged, so you'll still hear me. But I wanted to do this before I left. And the deal is that a lot of you do feel this. And we got a lot of responses. We got a lot of texter responses. But let me start with the question. One of the two questions that fueled this pod. It's kind of two pods in one. One is this from the 813. And I completely get this fan. And I would say to this fan, I hope that maybe you can find something to just twist your lens. But then there are people who, and I sent this text to the texters, 614-350-3315, if you want to send responses, if you want to be part of surveys for the pod here. You send a text to that number, get a link back, 2-week free trial. And some people got really mad at this fan. And so let's not be mad at the fan. Let's try to be understanding of the fan, because this fan is not alone. You guys have touched on this before, but here's my rant. Being an Ohio State fan is not fun. The expectations are so high that anything short of a natty seems like a disappointment. Whenever the Buckeyes destroy Illinois by 6 touchdowns, I feel relief instead of joy. A 2-touchdown win over Penn State, and my family and I spend hours nitpicking what they did wrong. I went to Ole Miss undergrad, and I learned a complete new way to be a fan and saw fandom from a different perspective. Making a bowl game and being competitive with teams like Alabama, LSU, etc. was all they cared about. Every year I tell myself I am going to step back and be a rational fan. But as soon as the ball is kicked off week 1, I fall back into my old ways. So that's where we started. And I get it. Part of what we asked here is, are you a fan of another team? I think if you're a fan of Ohio State, I think being a fan of another college football team can be very illuminating. It can ground you, maybe in some ways. It can provide a completely different sense of joy and disappointment. But I find that very interesting. We have a question about that. Are you a fan of another team? Here's a companion question that is from super long ago. It's from after the Michigan loss. And it's something we touched on before in the national championship pod. Is the national championship the standard for Ohio State? And I should have acknowledged this from the 937 back then. If this person listened to that pod and was like, that was my whole text. I'm sorry I didn't use it then. It was in my head. This is an idea for a pod I've had for a while. And I think after the reaction to idiot fans wanting Ryan Day out after the Michigan loss, it might be a good perspective pod. Who would you rather be since the BCS started in 1998? Would you rather be Ohio State, or would you rather be LSU, Georgia, Clemson? Since the national title game was implemented, here are the most titles. Bama 6, LSU 3, Ohio State, Clemson, Florida State, Florida, Georgia, all have 2. Would Ohio State fans rather have 10 years of 9-3 or 8-4 mediocrity like LSU just for one extra national title? You can look at flavors of the month like Georgia and Clemson now, but go back to 1998, and I bet Ohio State has the best win percentage in the Power Five. Would you trade that up? Would you trade that for just one more title? So we covered that a lot on the national title pod. Is that the standard? You can go back and listen to that. But the question of who would you rather be, and I think that's tied, then that's the same thing as like, who would you rather root for? So I asked that question. Let's see. In general, taking Ohio State specifically out of it, what is the best type of sports team to root for? Here are the candidates. The big dog. You expect a title every year, high expectations, you regularly win national championships. The consistent contender. Always in the title mix, don't really expect a title every year, but you do win titles every now and then. The good but not great team. A winner, but never expect a title. A championship would be almost a miracle, but you win. Or the scrappy underdog. You're an overachiever. An over 500 record is the goal, and you try to knock off a big dog every now and then. So don't think about Ohio State, because there's a second part of this question that I didn't ask, but I want you guys to think about. I would want to be a fan, I think, of the consistent contender, that you're always in the mix, but yet you aren't assuming a title. That's what you guys said too. 61% consistent contender. 33% said big dog. Expect a title every year. High expectations. 4% good but not great. 2% scrappy underdog. So now the question is, what's Ohio State? Is Ohio State a big dog, or is Ohio State a consistent contender? I would say Ohio State is a consistent contender, and I'm not going to dwell on that because that's the point I made for an hour and 40 minutes on the is a national title the expectation for Ohio State podcast. I don't think if you have 2 titles in 50 years that you could say that you are a big dog to the extent of I expect a title every year. You expect to be in the mix almost all the time, and you expect a title, not 0, but it is not a when you like count the rings and I want to get to 2 hands, right? It's not that. So I should have asked that. I think I'm okay on the surveys. I'm not perfect. I should have asked, okay, if these are the 4 categories of teams that I laid out, what do you think Ohio State is? So now have a discussion with your family, with your friends. Clearly, they're either a big dog or they're a consistent contender. So now let's put this in bigger context. Since Ohio State won its national championship in January 2003, from that point on, so, okay, Ohio State now has 2 national championships from that point because they have the 02 season and the 14 season. North American sports, I didn't include NHL. I didn't include MLS. If you're a hockey fan or a soccer fan, I apologize. I don't apologize. I did NFL, NBA, MLB, college basketball, college football. Since then, if we give Ohio State 2 titles, do you want to guess how many teams/programs have more than 2 titles since then? You're an Ohio State fan, you have 2 titles. That's good. Do you wish there were more? Yeah. But how many have more? You want to guess? Make a guess. Get it in your head. It's 10 teams overall. Alabama football has 6. The New England Patriots have 5. So Saban and Belichick are making everybody else miserable. Thanks, guys. Thanks for being probably the greatest college football coach of all time and probably the greatest NFL coach of all time. Thanks a lot. The Boston Red Sox have 4, which creates unbearable Boston sports fans. So 2 of their main teams are at the top of this. The Golden State Warriors have 4. The San Antonio Spurs have 4. UConn basketball, the absolute most under-the-radar blue blood in America, has 4. UConn basketball has 4. Teams with 3. The Miami Heat have 3. The Los Angeles Lakers have 3. The San Francisco Giants in baseball have 3. And LSU football has 3. So in college, it's only 3 teams that have more than Ohio State's 2 since then, that have more. Alabama football UConn basketball, LSU football. And then we're running through, what are we talking about? We're talking about the Patriots, the Red Sox, the Warriors, the Spurs, the Heat, the Lakers, the Giants. There are 16 teams with 2, and Ohio State's one of them. Here are those teams. In baseball, the St. Louis Cardinals and the Houston Astros. In NFL, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Pittsburgh Steelers, New York Giants, Kansas City Chiefs. So the Chiefs are great. Ohio State and the Chiefs have the same number. College football, USC, Florida, Clemson, Georgia, Ohio State. College basketball, Florida, back-to-back, one at Ohio State's expense. Kansas, North Carolina, Duke, Villanova. So Ohio State football, you think about the Blue Bloods in college basketball. UConn. But the big dogs are like, oh, you're a big dog in college basketball. Duke, Carolina, Kansas. Same number as Ohio State in this period that we're talking about. Or we're starting with an Ohio State title, so it gives a little edge to Ohio State. So anyway, there's only 10. There's only 10 fan bases happier than you when it comes to rings. So I think that's worth thinking about. And the point that the texter made about LSU, we talked about on that national championship podcast. You can think only about titles, but it's what happens in between the titles. Are you competing for titles or not? And Ohio State clearly is competing for titles while they're not winning them. And LSU is not as much, just not. So we're going to dwell a little bit on this title thing before we get into the burden of expectations and whether you agree or vehemently disagree with the fan who said it's not fun to root for Ohio State. These are responses to the podcast about is the national championship the standard. Outside of a few notable dynasties, Miami, Nebraska, USC, Bama, and now Georgia in college football, for most of college football's top tier, winning a national championship is still like a game of whack-a-mole. Everything has to line up at just the right time to win it all. Get hot at the end, but don't have a bad loss. Have a dominant team, but have a non-favorable schedule. So that, like they said, 05 Ohio State. Dominant team, but the rough schedule, you lose to Texas and Penn State, right? 2015, get hot, don't have a bad loss. They say 2015, the Michigan State loss, they're a great team. They have a bad loss. It's just so darn hard, and we need to be happy with our one every 10 or so years. The most important thing is that we're competing every year and increasing our chances because we're not like LSU that seems to make the most of their opportunities and can go from a national champion to a 5-loss team. Whack-a-mole, I think, is good. A title is whack-a-mole, or a title is a cherry on top from the 614. Did I say that last one was from our guy, Ty in Austin, in the 512? I know you can't put every nuanced take into a survey response, but I look at national titles as a cherry on top of a great season that I do expect to get on occasion. Maybe like a really great encore or a surprise course at the end of a fancy meal. It doesn't mean much if the foundation isn't built right leading up to it. Actually, it's kind of like wanting to see a 5-star dominate the 2s first. This is what we talked about, right? Dominate the 2s, be a 5-star recruit, dominate the 2s, then move up. I want to see Ohio State dominate Michigan. I think that's calling Michigan the 2s. And the Big Ten first before really focusing on titles. But I expect that they will increase their dominance enough from time to time that they can focus on a title. But they have been not dominating enough lately, so a national title isn't top of mind. Cherry on top, I think, is good. I think a cherry on top is good. This relates to 6 Bama titles, more than anybody in any sport. From the 4-4-0, beat Michigan, win the Big Ten, make the playoff. Hit 2 of those 3, and it's a successful season in my view. I believe that's the standard Ryan Day and the program have set for themselves too. Anything beyond that is bonus. Anything below that is failure. Expecting titles is insanity, and in my opinion, is a symptom of Nick Saban's success over the past 15 years. People think a dynasty like that is normal or a reasonable goal to achieve. It isn't. What he's done is historic and probably won't ever happen again. Any Ohio State fan or Georgia fans or even Alabama fans moving forward that apply that standard to their program are going to be disappointed a lot. That's from B in the 4-4-0. I think that's really good. This is a one from Ty that he threw this in, by the way. I'd like to look at the top tier college football programs and what their championship rate is historically the past 10, 20, 50 years. You could then look at which programs are above or below their average and why. That would be a good playoff survivor pod. That's a good. I told Ty that I'm going to steal the championship rate and what it is historically, what it is in the modern day. I'm very interested in creating a baseline of expectations. And I think you can do that historically. And I think you can do that by looking at changes to your program. What Minnesota did in the 40s doesn't particularly apply to Minnesota today, but I think you can look at the group of teams around you. Think you can look at your own history. You think you can look at conference changes, demographic changes, and decide this program should, in quotation marks, win 7.3 games per year. This program should have a 10-win season 2 times a decade, 5 times a decade. This program should, win a national title every so often, whatever, and put numbers on it. And then you can say, are you hitting it or not? Are you above or below your own standard? And I'm super, super, super interested in that. And championship rate, I think, is part of that. Okay. This is kind of stuff we had before. We want to get into the new responses about this, about do you have angst or not? Do you feel burdens or not? But our friend Meredith from Minnesota, my dad grew up in Plain City and passed his love for the Buckeyes down to me. I don't miss an episode of your podcast. Dad's Ohio State devotion now runs 3 generations deep because my 2-year-old daughter asks to listen to the Buckeye Talk intro song at bedtime every night, happily singing along, and she excitedly cheers, "Go CJ," whenever she sees any football game on TV. Thank you for all you do to make being an Ohio State fan more fun. Meredith, that's our guy Mike Lewis, who wrote the theme song. I hope Mike is listening and hears that. We hear that and we are humbled, and it just brings it all home for us because it should be fun. And we hope it is. And we'll talk about that more next on Buckeye Talk.